In 1986, in October, there was a very small uprising in a very small country of Togo in West Africa. The neighboring Chad had sent guerrilla forces over into Togo for, maybe to try and take over the country or to whip up some fervor or something like that. Now, the interesting dynamic was that Togo was a U.S. ally. Most of the countries surrounding it were all Soviet allies. So they were kind of like a diamond in the rough, a friend of the U.S. And so the president of the country immediately said it was a terrorist incident. And he wanted the FBI and the CIA and the State Department, everybody to come over and investigate this. The Bureau had no interest in it. There was no American victims or hostages or anything like that. It was just an insurrection, a border insurrection. So the State Department sent me over. I went with 2 DEA agents and an officer from OGA, other government agency. They had 2 explosives experts that were going to look at some explosives and some armaments. And the Togolese government had saved a whole bunch of evidence of this terrorist uprising. It really was an insurrection. They were calling it a terrorist uprising. And so the FBI wasn't interested in sending any explosive experts. We reached out to the DEA, and they were. So the 4 of us deployed over to Togo in October of 1986. And we went to where the Togolese government had saved all the dead bodies for us. That was really not helpful. We didn't need to see that. But they also had spread out a whole bunch of AK-47s. They had a Browning high-power pistol, a bunch of simplex plastics explosives. The stuff was very old, kind of crystallized. Everything was kind of old. It was all rusted. Stuff was probably 20 years old then from the Vietnam War era. And the only thing that wasn't old or kind of rusted out were 2, maybe the size of a cell phone today, pretty sophisticated timers. It had digital readouts on them, and they really were kind of unusual compared to everything else. And so we asked the Togolese government if we could take one of them. We actually asked if we could take both of them, but they let us take one of those timers. So I carried that back to the U.S. in a diplomatic pouch and came back to the Maine state and wrote up a big report about what we found. And in fact, we did find some Libyan backing in some of those arms. They came back to the government of Libya that had been sold those weapons. And the timer was kind of shopped around to the FBI and the CIA, and it was eventually made its way to like the miscellaneous timer shelf at the CIA, and nobody thought anything about it. It was 1986 in October. Flash forward to December of 1988, a year and a half later, almost 2 years later, Pan Am 103 blew up. Well, by now I'm an FBI agent. I'd kind of gone to the FBI from the Diplomatic Security Service. And I would say another year and a half after that, probably 1990-ish, I get a phone call from somebody who went on to become a good friend of mine in the Washington field office. And he said, "Are you the same Jim Casey that went to Togo with diplomatic security in 1986? And I said, "Yeah, that's me." He says, "Listen, we need to send you a bunch of reports that you wrote back then. You need to rewrite them like you're an FBI agent, because we think that timer was very important to solving the mystery of Pan Am 103. There were only 26 of those timers ever created. They were all created by a Swiss company for the government of Libya. And we think if we can prove forensically that that timer you recovered is the same as the other 25 that were ever made, and we've accounted for about 20 of them, it's pretty critical evidence." So I did. I kind of rewrote my diplomatic security reports, put them in the fashion of what an FBI report would look like. That got included into the evidence. And then in 2001, I went over to The Hague in the Netherlands to testify in the trial against the 2 terrorists who were being tried in a Scottish court held in the Netherlands to be responsible for Pan Am 103. And then you may remember one of them was convicted and one of them was, found not proven, not guilty, not proven.